the exception of the late John Hurt and Christopher Eccleston, we do not have Big Finish stories, Big Finish releases with the actual Doctor Who modern day actors reprising their roles. We have the Doctor Chronicles range to fill in this gap, where we have Jacob Dudman basically filling in for the role of Matt Smith for David Tennant, and also Peter Capaldi in these Chronicles range, which sort of swap between full-blown, full-cast audio dramas and also part narration, part voice-acted show. This is what we have with the 10th Doctor Chronicles. Volume 1 came out in April 2018, starring Jacob Dudman, also had Jacqueline King and also Michelle Ryan. But now we have a follow-up, a long-awaited follow-up that was recorded during lockdown, the 10th Doctor Chronicles Volume 2, Defender of the Earth, starring Jacob Dudman as the 10th Doctor. Now, all of these stories apparently take place in the gap between Journey's End and the Waters of Mars. However, I actually think that one of them takes place a little bit earlier, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. We have 4 stories here, which are not full-cast audio dramas. They do have voice actors in them, and Jacob Dudman plays a variety of roles, but these are also partly narrated. I'll play some clips which will demonstrate that shortly, but we have The Thing in the Forest by Trevor Baxendale, The Opacity Factor by Carl Rowans, Freedom or Death by Alice Cavender, and The Siege of Shackleton by Una McCormack. Now, you may recognise some of these names. Una McCormack is a Big Finish mainstay. Alice Cavender has released a couple of stories recently as well for Big Finish. Carl Rowans, as far as I can tell, is a brand new writer for Big Finish with The Opacity Factor, but we also have Trevor Baxendale. One thing I will say going in, I won't let it affect the actual review itself, but I do want to put a quick disclaimer here. For those of you who might not want to support this box set because it has a story in it written by Trevor Baxendale. Trevor Baxendale has become pretty infamous in the Doctor Who community for consistently liking and following incredibly transphobic tweets, and also in the past few months as well, pretty anti-Semitic tweets as well. He has not tweeted out anything directly anti-trans, but the amount of anti-trans people that he follows on Twitter, and also the tweets that he has been liking as well, kind of paints him pretty obviously as a very anti-trans individual. If you don't want to support this box set because one of the stories is written by an ardent transphobe, that is absolutely your prerogative, but I was sent this as a review copy from Big Finish Productions, so I am going to review it. And there are also 3 more stories written by other writers who are not Trevor Baxendale, so do with that information whatever you will. Jenny, Dimensions in Jen, has put together a pretty comprehensive look at everything that Trevor Baxendale has been supporting and liking online, so be sure to check out her tweet on the subject if you wanted to, if you are so inclined. Your own personal threshold for what you will and will not support based on those who are involved in it and their beliefs is between you and the media in question. I won't impose that on you, but I figure because of the pretty sizable LGBTQ plus portion of my audience that it was worth noting. So, the 10th Doctor Chronicles Volume 2, Defender of the Earth, starts with The Thing in the Forest by Trevor Baxendale. Now, this is a story set in Norway in the early 1940s. The 10th Doctor has landed in the midst of World War II, and it's not just German soldiers that he has to worry about. He lands near a woman called Ilse Johansson, played by Camilla Arfwedson, who is a Norwegian soldier whose family was killed by the Nazis, and she is now basically a resistance fighter in Europe trying to stop the Nazi menace and the Nazi threat. However, it is not just Germans and their dogs that they need to be worried about in the forest. There is some sort of strange massive creature that is out for blood and has picked up their scent. The 10th Doctor and Ilse Johansson find a German soldier in the forest who seems to be absolutely terrified. Let's play a clip from The Thing in the Forest.
The soldier was still cowering against the bole of the tree. His eyes were wide, checking all around the forest, to the side, behind them, up in the branches. Ilse and the Doctor seemed to be the least of his worries.
He's frightened out of his mind, but he's not our friend. He is a German soldier. He is the enemy, Doctor.
Yes, I know, and we're his enemy. He doesn't look too bothered about that, does he?
There it is again. What is it? What is making that awful sound?
I think we should move away from here. Sounds like it's getting closer and I don't want to run into any more soldiers. Come on, help me get this lad to his feet.
No! We cannot take him with us. He will slow us down, call out to his comrades.
So what are you going to do? Kill him? I can't allow that, Ilse.
This is war, Doctor. I am a resistance fighter. I must kill him. They are my orders and they should be yours as well.
He can come with us.
I am not taking prisoners.
He's just a boy, Ilse.
So were my brothers when the Nazis broke down our door and killed them in front of Mama and me. I don't care that he's a boy.
He's somebody's son. Somebody's brother, maybe. Listen. Hear that? More soldiers coming this way. We have to move. So he either comes with us, or you let him go.
If I let him go, he will give away our position.
They're already searching the forest for us. He won't be giving that much away, and if we go now, we can get a head start.
So, The Thing in the Forest, I would call a solid opener to the box set. It doesn't really push the boat out there. It is basically just a bog-standard 10th Doctor adventure with the sort of moralising that you would expect from a Doctor Who story set in World War II Europe, where the Doctor encounters people from opposing sides, and also there's a great big alien in the forest. There are some really great moments and cool set pieces, however. There's a really genuinely creepy set piece inside of a cabin where the Doctor, Ilsa, and another soldier end up being locked in, and this creature, this thing in the forest, which personally, with my mind's eye while listening to this, thought of as those alien creatures from Attack the Block, but way bigger, and, you know, only one of them as opposed to a massive group of them. But there's a really great set piece where that creature is sort of circling the cabin and scraping its nails across the door. There's some really great sound design with this, and some really great intense moments, and some really cool encounters. There's also, honestly, a really nice and empathetic moral at the end about just because it's a German soldier or a European soldier, resistance fighter or whatever, does not mean that they should not be treated with respect and dignity, even though they are your enemies. And the fact that a line like that was said in a script written by Trevor Baxendale, of all people, was so ironic, it made me want to curl up into the fetal position. But in terms of the actual story itself, The Thing in the Forest is a decent opener. It's solid, doesn't really push the boat out in terms of actually, like, challenging the 10th Doctor or the type of scenario that he's in, with the exception of the fact that it is a very physically powerful and imposing creature that probably will not negotiate with the Doctor on any sort of level. Cool moments, cool story overall generally. I think that Jacob Dudman, as you folks were saying in the chat, is not a perfect impression of the 10th Doctor, but sort of like the inflections and, you know, the sniffs and it's stuff like that that you kind of expect from typical 10th Doctor. I think he does those mannerisms really, really well. It's not a dead cert rock solid impression like his 11th Doctor, but like this and his Capaldi impression, Peter Capaldi impression for the 12th Doctor, he definitely captures the spirit, and it's just a really strong performance overall over the course of the box set. He voices many characters over the course of this box set. Basically, whenever there's a male character and one female at one point, it's Jacob Dudman voicing them, but for the most part, it's a group of different women in each story who get their own individual voice actor. And one of the best voice actors and one of the best characters over the course of this box set comes in the second one, The Opacity Factor by Carl Rowans. As far as I'm aware, this is Carl Rowans' first script for Big Finish, or at least the first script that Carl Rowans has done that has been released out into the public. Like I said, this was recorded during the early stages of lockdown. This was like recorded in April and May 2020. So this was like nearly 4 years ago that this was first recorded. This has taken a long time to get across the finish line. I'm not really sure why that is, but whatever. Carl Rowans writes The Opacity Factor, where the Doctor, he lands on a moon base, and there's some really great world building in the first act of the story where they go into detail, Carl Rowans goes into detail about the jurisdiction of the moon, and that the Chinese managed to get Bagsies on the first on one side of the moon, so if they wanted to do experiments there, if they wanted to do any sort of excavations there or whatever, they had to get their permission, and there's some really nice little bits of world building there. But in charge of this particular moon base is Gino Columbu, played by Thalissa Texera. So she is in charge of this base and is overseeing an artificial intelligence that is called Sagi, and what they're looking for is the titular opacity factor, which is essentially the technical term in the Doctor Who universe for the invisible steps that an artificial intelligence would take to get from one train of thought to another without prompting and without coaching. There's a great scene where Gino is talking through the Doctor what the opacity factor is and the particular nature of the AI Sagi that they're dealing with. Let's play a clip from the Opacity Factor.
20 odd years ago, an AI was given a basic task. It was asked to monitor and record the conversations in a room of politicians. It did this, a simple enough request. Then, almost as a joke, someone asked the AI what it thought about the people in the room. And the readouts it gave us said that 2 of the people in the room were in the early stages of developing schizophrenia, and another was having an affair with her boss.
And so people asked the two obvious questions. Was this information correct, and how did an AI make that determination? Without that information pre-fed. I assume it was proven that this information hadn't been pre-fed.
Oh, absolutely. It was both brilliant and terrifying. We simply don't know how an AI that had been programmed by a team who didn't even know the people in that room, a team on another continent, could return such an answer. When this was investigated, not only was the affair exposed instantly, but the two men did indeed develop schizophrenia, 5 and 8 years later respectively. Then AIs began diagnosing cancer in people who showed no discernible physical symptoms. They were correct as well.
And no doubt the military's ears pricked up at some point. Because, like all things, they saw a potential weapon, yes?
Sorry folks, I may have accidentally misled you. Carl Rowans has actually written for Big Finish before, a monthly range story called Interstitial, but also a class story from the Volume 3 set called The Sower's Ditch, which I have listened to and I actually really enjoyed that, so I apologise. This is not Carl Rowan's first outing at Big Finish. I apologise for that. That was my mistake. I should have double checked that before going in. Anyway, so the Opacity Factor is absolutely terrific. This could have been one of the 2009 specials. The Opacity Factor is such a creepy and scary story where the Doctor is on this moon base called Moon Center 7 in the far future. They're isolated from any communications because the idea is that if this artificial intelligence is able to escape or is able to do something of its own volition, they want to make sure they're as disconnected from humanity and everything else as possible so it can't escape them or hop somewhere else. However, one thing that they did not anticipate is that someone would land a TARDIS on Moon Center 7 who is able to communicate with the artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence is able to communicate with the TARDIS. And there's some really creepy, terrific scenes in this story narrated by Jacob Dubman as well, where the TARDIS and Saggy are just silently communicating with each other and you have no idea what's going on. And the 10th Doctor is kind of finding it very difficult to know how to navigate an artificial intelligence that has gone way above its station and is hoping to escape and is also in control of the moonbase itself. There's a really creepy reveal as to why the moonbase leader, who you heard in the clip there, is opening up so casually to the Doctor, and then it turns out actually the artificial intelligence predicted the Doctor's arrival 20 minutes before it happened, so that's why the Moon Center 7 captain leader of the moonbase was not surprised and is able to open up to the Doctor. That's such a great moment in the story. And then it just keeps on getting better and better from there, with a really lovely ending as well. But it's a really terrific trip. This is honestly, you put a story like this in the 2009 specials instead of Waters of Mars, and it's that sort of caliber. It's that sort of weird existential dread. Not just on an AI bad, but sort of, okay, this is an actual doomsday scenario with an AI in a really meticulous and well thought out scenario with really interesting characters who are, for the most part, a lot of them are red shirts. You'll know when you listen to the story, but the Opacity Factor is absolutely terrific. Top tier Doctor Who, and honestly, with its presence alone, might bump this whole box set into my top 10 box sets of 2023 just by virtue of it alone. Carl Rowans has made an absolutely outstanding splash with this story. Obviously, this is not their very first Doctor Who story, but this is their most recent one, and I really hope that in the nearly 4 years since this story was recorded before the release of this box set, that Big Finish have got Carl doing more and more things. This is an absolutely terrific box set, and the only regret is that David Tennant himself did not get to tackle the material, but Jacob Dudman is more than up to the task and does a terrific job here. Now, let's talk about a Doctor Who story that will never be political or feminist, Freedom or Death by Alice Cavender, which follows May, who is a suffragette in the 1910s, played by Kathy Sarah, and she has been having nightmares. She has been having dreams of war and conflict and death, and the Doctor turns up near a suffragette rally in 1910s England. He's been able to telepathically sense May's dreams from miles away and starts having a conversation with her in a nearby diner, in a nearby cafe, in order to learn more about what's going on. Let's play a clip from Freedom or Death.
She drained the cup and he refilled it, watching her intently.
Are you one of them doctors that writes to the Times? Saying how barbaric the feeding is?
Not exactly. I'm more hands-on.
Deeds, not words.
Exactly, said the doctor, buttering a scone. Jam?
Nah, I know what goes into it.
Ah, you're an elf. I love an elf.
The doctor said, noticing the red stripe of the East London Federation on her suffragette badge.
Are you taking the mickey? You reckon you've got yourself a pretty but dumb slum girl who you can lay your cloak down for and then I'll forever be at your beck and call? If so, you're out of luck, pal. Been there before. My cause comes first.
Easy, Tiger.
Well, stands to reason. With a cut of that suit, you're not short of a few bob. You've already got the vote, not like the lads I work with. It ain't no game to us.
Well, currently to have the vote, a man is required to have property, which I do not. Well, I have a sort of place that belongs to me, but a vote here, no.
Oh, sorry. I assumed. So then you really are a suffragist?
I'm for human rights. Well, everyone's rights.
Ah, one of them vegetarians.
I love that line. Anyway, so this is the story I was alluding to earlier, where I don't think that this would take place, I'd argue at least, that this doesn't take place during that 2009 specials gap between Journey's End and The Waters of Mars. I actually think that this takes place a little bit earlier in the Doctor's timeline, maybe during that time between The Runaway Bride and Smith and Jones, where the Doctor is a little bit closer to the Time War. Because, of course, there's the idea that war is looming on the continent and across the whole world, in fact, in a few years' time, in the shadows of the suffragette movement and everything. So there's the whole political undercurrent there. There's people who are fighting in the streets, causing violence and stirring up ruckus. There's even the background detail of the Cat and Mouse Act, which during the women's suffrage movement in the UK meant that you couldn't, kill people in prison, but it meant that if they were getting too unwell to be in captivity, because suffragettes, people campaigning for women's right to vote, would go on hunger strike, you'd release them from prison, let them get their strength back, and then rearrest them in order to put them on hunger strike again. It was a savage, barbaric act in the 1910s, and we're seeing kind of similar shades of that happening right now in the UK when it comes to protests, specifically around climate activism. Doctor was never political, forget about it, whatever. So, Freedom or Death by Alice Cavender. I'm not convinced it works, but it's a fascinating listen nevertheless. Alice Cavender's a particularly interesting voice because she did a previous Doctor Chronicles for the 11th Doctor Chronicles range, an 11th Doctor and Clara story where they meet Jane Austen. She's got a pretty interesting and distinctive voice, a fiercely feminist voice as well. And like I said, I'm not entirely sure that Freedom or Death works because the actual threat, the actual thing that needs defeating over the course of this story is not something that would particularly spring to my mind when I think of the particular socio-political ramifications of the suffragettes movement in the 1910s, whether it be the lack of intersectionality, which is mentioned in the clip as well, that it was primarily an upper class campaign to get the rights for women who have property and, and also for white women as well, of course. And also when it comes to the Cat and Mouse Act and also all the baggage and everything that came with the death of Emily Davidson as well, throwing herself under the king's horse. There's an awful lot of potential in a premise like that. But what Alice Cavender decides to settle on in terms of an actual threat feels so far removed from all of that. But when I listened to the behind the scenes interview and how she was able to rationalize it and justify that approach to who the villain was over the course of the story, what the extraterrestrial threat was, why May is having these nightmares, these dreams of war, potentially an alien war on another planet, and how the Doctor's involved. It made a weird type of sense, and I honestly found it super, super interesting to listen to figure out whether or not it stuck the landing. I think it does. It's a fascinating listen. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure if it works, and I probably need to listen to it one or two more times before I can properly articulate my opinions on it. But in terms of stories that swing for the fences, I massively respect Freedom or Death. It's a very passionate story. It's a very interesting story about women's suffrage. And then it just decides to take a right turn on Banana Street and just goes completely bonkers for who the threat is, how it manifests itself, and what it does. And I honestly massively respected it. It's an interesting listen, really fascinating listen, that I will be listening to again, just to make sure that I've kind of figured it out. But either way, I really enjoyed it. I think that Kathy Sari does a great job as May over the course of the story as well. Somebody who, meeting the 10th Doctor, gets way more than she bargains for as well. Great sound design as well. It's interesting. I do need to listen to this one again. But we do have as well the finale of this range, The Siege of Shackleton by Una McCormack. So the Doctor has landed centuries into the future, and essentially it is a Mad Max style dystopian future Earth, except this is not in the Australian desert, they are in Antarctica. Earth has been ravaged by the effects of climate change, and there is now no longer snow in Antarctica, but it's still a frozen wasteland. There's just no longer snow falling in the tundra anymore. And the Doctor lands near an Antarctic base, and you've basically got these groups of scavengers who are fighting over the last bits of Earth's resources, and there's only a few million people on the Earth left fighting each other because the planet has been destroyed by climate change. And of course there's the social commentary that comes from that. However, the Doctor, on his journeys, meets Natalia Block, played by Rebecca Brewer, and Natalia is a resident of Shackleton who is on watch, spots the blue box being shot upon by neighbouring snipers from another town, and decides to take him back to their base in Shackleton. They're investigating an approaching group that's approaching Shackleton. There's aliens involved, but let's play a quick clip from The Siege of Shackleton.
Hey, what's that up ahead?
Natalia turned her full attention back to the way ahead. There, on the horizon, were dark shapes, moving towards them.
Uh-oh. Do you think that could be whoever attacked Shackleton?
The Doctor shrugged.
Dunno. Shall we take a closer look?
That's what we came out for.
He waved his hand.
Then, onwards. Hit the ground, sister. Pedal to the metal.
I'll just go at my own pace, if that's okay.
He looked embarrassed.
Yeah, do that.
They drove on towards whoever was coming towards them. Very soon, it was clear what they were looking at. A convoy of trucks heading towards Shackleton. Natalia stopped the truck.
If this is the attack we've been expecting, we should warn them now. Get back as quick as we can.
She reached for the radio, but the Doctor stopped her hand. He shook his head. His voice, when he spoke, was soft and sad.
I don't think these people are planning on putting up a fight. Look at them. There's children. These aren't soldiers. They're refugees.
Natalia peered at the group heading their way. He was right. A handful of trucks, with children and old people inside, moving slowly towards them. A few motorbikes alongside. But most of the people were on foot. The Doctor said,
"We should help."
So, like I said, it's a Mad Max-style post-apocalyptic future Earth, except they are now in Antarctica. And that's a really cool setting. It is a novel setting as well, where the environment is literally trying to wipe you off the face of the Earth, which you have destroyed via climate change. But it turns out that there is another threat that is attacking the human settlements, and they are coming from the sky. You folks pointed out this Dreg-looking thing on the cover as well, but no, it is actually these little grey things, these Area 51 looking aliens here with the eyes here on the cover and the gills on the neck. So that's the villain that we're dealing with for this particular story. And what we have here with the Siege of Shackleton is a really, really effective and really, really tense base under siege story, where the Doctor and the people of Shackleton, particularly Natalia, who is the companion surrogate for this story, gets roped along in a story where the Doctor is trying to settle a peace agreement between the last remnants of humanity and these alien invaders who seem intent on wiping out the last of the human settlement. And the motivation behind the aliens is a really effective one, which really helps to ratchet up the tension and ratchet up the stakes. This is a really great story. I really enjoyed the music as well from Lee Adams in this story in particular. Lee Adams does the music for all 4 of the stories in this box set, but I think it was the music in The Siege of Shackleton which really stood out for me, particularly when the action started to ramp up in the third third act. My main critique and issue with the Siege of Shackleton, and this could honestly be fixed and then they have to just sort out the digital copies that people can buy for this, is that about 50% of the aliens in the second half of the story cannot understand a single word that they're saying. There's too much filtering, there's too much post-processing on Jacob Dudman's voice because he voices the aliens in this story. It's not his fault, it is whoever did the post-processing on the voice, who did the audio editing for those voices. It's a very key part of the story as we go from the second act to the third act, where the exposition is coming in and the aliens are explaining their motivation and what they're doing and the Doctor's trying to broker peace with them. Can't understand what they're saying. Sorry, I listened to the scene multiple times. There are several stretches of dialogue where I just can't hear them. Can't understand them. I know that Big Finish are sometimes caught between a rock and a hard place with how they're able to depict villains in audio, because there's only, it's either human normal voice or weird distorted voice with filtering effects and echoing and stuff. But honestly, there had to be a better way to depict the aliens in this story. I just genuinely cannot hear them, like for 50% of their dialogue, their audible dialogue. For the first half of the story, where they're talking in code and they're talking like in scrambled translated signals or whatever that the Doctor can't decipher, makes sense, whatever. But then for the second half of the story, when the Doctor breaks the code and is trying to communicate with them, can't hear them. I don't think that's an unreasonable I don't think that's an unreasonable criticism when you cannot hear one of the main parts of a conversation, which is a bit of a disappointment. But still, with the exception of that, I thought the Siege of Shackleton was a really good story. In the behind the scenes, they talk about how this is like a Doctor who's making his way to his Time Lord victorious arc, where he decides who lives and who dies and what is his moral judgment. How he lands in a post-apocalyptic Earth and is essentially having a go at all of the humans for letting the planet go to ruin, which, to be fair, is a good hill for him to die on morally, but it's like, who gives him the right as a traveller of the stars who claims Earth as his home but is hardly ever around? He could have stopped climate change, but he didn't, because he's the Doctor and that's not how fiction works in the case for Doctor Who in terms of TV and stuff. But it's like, who gives him the right to make these decisions? Some of the callous behaviour in the third act as well, really effective. Jacob Dudman plays it really, really well. It's just a really strong story. It's Doctor Who meets Mad Max, with an alien encounter in it, which is really effective and really, really tense, as you have like a fleet of alien ships which are laying siege to these human settlements which basically have a couple of bullets and mortars, and that's kind of it. And how is the Doctor going to broker a peace between an alien threat which will not take no for an answer and humans who are wanting to maybe salvage that technology once all of this is said and done? Really, really good stuff, really effective. Una McCormack is a mainstay Big Finish writer and Doctor Who writer generally, who's done some really good stuff over the past few years. Siege of Shackleton continues that trend. Really good stuff. Overall, as a box set, there's some incredible highs. I think that the Opacity Factor is an outstanding 10 out of 10 story. The Siege of Shackleton as well flirts with greatness at times as well. Freedom or Death, I'm not sure if it works, but I damn sight respect it a hell of a lot. And The Thing in the Forest, strong, spooky, based under siege forest World War II story that has really effective moments of atmosphere. I was kind of surprised that Defender of the Earth is as good as it is. Really strong performances across the board, especially being led by Jacob Dudman, who makes a great 10th Doctor in this range. Really terrific stuff. I'm assuming that a lot of these might have been stories that weren't able to be placed for the 10th Doctor proper, as in like David Tennant when he was doing lockdown stuff for Big Finish as well. I'm assuming that maybe some of these are holdover stories, or maybe these are things that they've had on the back burner for the Chronicles range for a while. It would make sense why this has taken nearly 3.5 years to come out after being recorded, let alone written. But still, Defender of the Earth is a really strong box set. I was actually kind of surprised at how good the caliber of these stories were and how strong the characters and the themes were. So yeah, I really appreciated like all of these stories. But the Opacity Factor is like the clear head and shoulder standout here. It's absolutely terrific and almost worth the purchase alone, like in terms of the box set as well. Like I said, whether or not you want to buy the box set because it's got Trevor Baxendale involved is your prerogative. I will say though, at time of making this live stream, he has not been confirmed to be doing any more Big Finish stuff in terms of writing. He did Solitary Confinement for the War Master last year as well, and then he's done Defender of the Earth, but I think that might be it for Trevor Baxendale at Big Finish, particularly as Big Finish tries to expand its talent pool to include lots of trans and non-binary creatives. So it's probably for the best, unless Trevor Baxendale decides to lay off the turf train or whatever. But still, I can say that the box set itself is really, really strong. Really good stuff.